Old Scatness, with its broch and its associated wheelhouses, was first discovered during road building in 1975. The broch only came to light when a JCB driver complained about problems while digging out a new access road for the airport control tower. This attests to the broch mason's workmanship. This was the first Iron Age site to be investigated in recent years in Shetland and has yielded much insight into life in these times. Old Scatness turns out to be yet another settlement which was occupied continuously for a very long time, in this case 2,500 years. There are Bronze Age ard plough marks in the soil which date from 2000 BC. About 400 BC were the oldest broch levels, and about 100 BC are the aisled roundhouses. Then, in AD 600 were Pictish houses, about 800s the Norse buildings, and all remained hidden until it was rediscovered in 1975. Jarlshof is one of the most important prehistoric sites in Shetland, with a history of almost uninterrupted habitation right up to the 1600s. Originally the archaeological remains were more extensive, but rising seas and coastal erosion have destroyed much of the site. This same sea was probably what brought the first settlers to the area, moving gradually northwards along the Scottish coast, always in sight of land. What survives is the result of the construction and abandonment of many settlements, one on top of the other, interspersed with wind-blown deposits of sand from the nearby dunes. The resulting mound, sealed and unrecognised for many years, was finally uncovered by storms in the 1890s. The remains visible today were excavated in the late 1800s, the 1930s and the 1950s. The remains of the Neolithic age are complex and many-layered. Neolithic grooved ware pottery, similar to that found in Orkney, was found here, which indicates that the earliest settlers were here from about 2500 BC. There are several oval Bronze Age houses, and they are typical of Shetland dwellings of this time, with internal walls which subdivide them into cells. One was later used, about 700 BC, as a smithy to cast bronze tools, weapons and jewellery using clay moulds. A substantial Iron Age broch survives to about 2.4 metres high. It may date from about 200 BC. Later, more small roundhouses were built nearer the shore. Several wheelhouses cluster in and around the broch. This distinctive type of structure is also found at Old Scatness and in the Western Isles. The circular houses have radial stone spokes which divide the living space and would have helped support the roof. When there is a space between the piers and the walls, the houses are described as aisled. The Vikings arrived about 800 AD. And the Norse settlement here dates from the 9th to the 13th centuries. The original house was over 20 metres long, with outhouses and a possible bathhouse. Construction was stone, with upper turf walls, with wooden roof supports, and perhaps interior wall linings. There would have been a large central hearth, and benches lined the walls. The new hall was built in the 1580s by Earl Robert Stewart, new Lord of Shetland. The poet and novelist Sir Walter Scott visited the southern tip of the mainland Shetland in 1814 as a commissioner for the Northern Lighthouse Service. He later set his historical novel The Pirate here, published in 1822, and he coined the name Jarlshof for this area. Jarlshof is officially described as one of the most remarkable archaeological sites ever excavated in the British Isles, and certainly visiting it you can appreciate that as you see the 6 levels of occupation from a Stone Age hut, perhaps 4,000 years old, through an Iron Age broch and wheelhouses to a sizable Viking village and medieval farmstead. It's only because it's been covered by layers upon wind-blown sand that it has been so well preserved. And then, when the storm happened and it was uncovered, that means that we can now visit it today. Sombra Head is the most southerly point on the mainland. The lighthouse, the first in Shetland, was designed by Robert Stevenson, engineer to the Northern Lighthouse Board. It was built in 1821 and automated in 1991. The cliffs surrounding the site are teeming with birds during the breeding season. Puffins, guillemots, razorbills, kittiwakes and fulmars can all be found here. Oyster catchers, wrens and twite are also commonly seen. The cliffs are covered with flowers. Pinks and campion abound. We are crossing over to St Ninians Isle on the tombolo, and the tombolo is what has happened when the waves from both sides of the island forced pebbles and sand to make this bridge going across between the two islands. It's the largest in the British Isles. So with this tombolo, it's not tidal like Lindisfarne. You can walk across it any time of the day, because the waves will not come over the top. This is the remains of St Ninian's Chapel. The remains date from the 12th century, though there was a chapel here earlier than that. And in 1958 there was a discovery by a schoolboy, when excavations were taking place, of buried treasure. And it was discovered that it was pictures treasure, probably buried for safekeeping during Viking raids. And 28 beautiful pieces of jewellery and other items were discovered by this schoolboy in 1958. There was probably a church here since the 8th century, and the actual graveyard was used right up until the 19th century. Some of the burials found here were believed not to be Christian because of the way they were placed in a crouched position. Shetland inspires artists and poets. John Betjeman was a poet inspired by Shetland, and a more recent one is Sheenagh Pugh, who is from South Wales originally, but now living near here, near Qaff, and she's written a poem called Qaff Gap. A place named for nothing, a space in a spine of hills, a great scoop of sky in a green spoon, a doorway from east to west. A place with a past before history started. Think the river back, the giant whose bed you stand in. It would run where the skewers balance between two hills, where air pours in place of water. Something was here, now nothing is. Nothing fills the eye, bowl-shaped, wind-blown, the colour of weather, salt-flavoured, singular. Who knew nothing could be such a landmark? From the North Sea, sailing up this coast, bays blur, nesses flatten out. It's hard to tell townships apart. But no one can miss the gap, the emptiness that signs its name across landscape, sky, that draws the fancy like a window, or rather the space in a ruined wall where a window was. We were chatting to local people in the Hoswick Visitor Centre, and a lady said to me, "It's a fine day, isn't it?" And that's just what Sheenagh Pugh has written a poem about. Rules of Conversation, Hoswick. Unless actually raining, it is a fine day and must be remarked on, lest the gods of weather, affronted, take the sun away. All objects except boats are masculine. Shears, watches, nails. I dunna mind where I left him, but he's no working. Don't ask where people live. It's, where do you stay? Our tenancy in the world is a transitory matter.